En este programa, Fernando se ha encontrado con el geobiólogo Richard Benishai, de Israel, en Cerdañola del Vallès, Barcelona, para conversar sobre el fenómeno que Richard califica como arquitectura invisible. Richard Benishai es maestro geobiólogo y enseña geobiología desde hace 14 años en 7 países. Es fundador de la Asociación en España por el Bienestar de la Tierra y es autor de diversas publicaciones sobre geobiología en varios idiomas.
Richard, en nuestras conversaciones anteriormente me has hablado de un concepto que parece muy interesante. Tú lo llamas la arquitectura invisible y me gustaría que nos introdujeses en este concepto. Háblanos de la arquitectura invisible, cuéntanos qué es.
The invisible architecture, like the name says, it's something that we don't see, but we can feel. And at a certain time in history, people like builders, architects, use the natural elements of nature to their profit. And by this I mean they use these methods. They use these methods in churches, in cathedrals, even in synagogues, to the maximum use in order to benefit from these energies that were created by the different elements. These different elements in homes can be negative, but when you apply them to a church or cathedral, they become very much positive. I will take, for example, underground water. Underground water is very destructive in a home, but yet when it's used in a church or cathedral, then it makes everything becomes positive, because also of the construction that we have in a church and a cathedral, because of the dimensions involved, because of the placement, because of the orientation. In addition to water, you can have faults. Faults, as you know, are very destructive also in a home. But yet, for every church that you will have an underground current at the entrance, and in the center you will have a fault. You have the use of Hartmann and Curry lines. Hartmann and Curry lines are used in columns, where you have one line going into the column, and by a certain process you actually separate this line in 3, 5, even more different lines. And this energy now is going to go up the columns, and sometimes it may fall back down on the people who are praying. And it's all positive energy. You have also some connections with other places. And these can be compared to internet connections, where the planet is connected in different centers, and so the energy and the information is passed from one place to the other. All these techniques are used in places of high energy, for people to come in and be infused with this energy, and then they can pray better, they can concentrate better, they can, yeah.
Esto es muy interesante. ¿Nos podrías dar algunos ejemplos de arquitectura invisible?
There are thousands of examples of invisible architecture, usually in places of faith, in places of prayer. Doesn't matter which religion. A lot of religions have taken this attitude of using the invisible architecture in their construction, in the construction of their buildings. If we take the Christian religion, you have the Cathedral of Chartres in France. The Cathedral of Chartres is located on a double line of gold, vertically and horizontally. It's a crossing. It's also located on a double line of silver, this way. And this gives it a very special high energy. These lines are going all around the planet. There are not too many. And these lines are something like 72 this way and 72 this way, latitude and longitude. Chartres is very fortunate to be on a double crossing of these lines. It is connected also by internet lines, we can say, to places like Giza, to Arles in France, to Istanbul, to Stonehenge. And these are like communication lines between different places for the planet. Another example is the Temple of Men in Egypt. This temple was built actually to the dimensions of the human body. But instead of being straight, the top portion is crooked. And the reason for this is that when the temple was built, they used the fault fire, which is under the temple, and this fault went on an angle. So they built the temple to match this fire. And some interesting things, the entrance to the temple is exactly the width of the fire, of the fault. And it follows it exactly, yes. You have another example of something that I've been to Notre Dame in Paris for a visit. And as I was standing there, I looked to my right and I see that there was a different angle in the columns. And when I took a close look at it, I could see that the columns, instead of being straight one behind the other, they were moved to the side. And when I took a look with my antennas, I saw that there was a fault there, and the fault was going also on an angle. Not a big angle, but enough so that you could see it by the eye. When I asked the people there who were working in the Cathedral of Paris, Notre Dame, they didn't know. They didn't know anything about it. So apparently the builders also matched the fault or the building to the fault. You can see this also in a small church in France, in Alsace, where I did some work there, and I wrote a book on it called Neuvillers-les-Savernes. It's the same. There is an angle there also of about 3.5 degrees, the same reason. The reason for using faults and water in the center of the church, the cathedral, is because the building is going to transform the negative energy to positive, and the fault and water are going to carry this energy from the front of the narthex to the rear, to the heart, the corazon, and so on outside. And so when people build cathedrals and churches, they used to put after the church, outside, they used to build houses. And so the houses would benefit from high energy. In addition to cathedrals and churches, you have synagogues in Israel, in other places. When in Israel, I studied synagogues, and I was a little surprised, but I saw that the same principles that you have in churches and cathedrals exist in these old synagogues in Israel. Of course, which came first? Well, it's clear. The synagogues came first. They were built according to certain principles. And then when the Templars came to the Holy Land to wage war against the Muslims, and to take Jerusalem back, and then they observed the building of the synagogues, and they used that for building churches and cathedrals. So you have this invisible architecture which basically takes in all the natural elements and maximizes their use for the benefit of men, of the fidèles, the people coming to pray there, to give them a high level of energy. Today, these places of holy these places of prayer are just built anywhere, in any way, using natural elements, very little natural elements, mostly blocks of concrete, mostly aluminium, mostly steel. I'll give you an example. In the Ivory Coast, there is a very big basilic there. It's built after the one in Rome and the St. Peter's. They built this whole place in 3 years, very quickly, using concrete, using aluminium. Energetically, this place has a very low level of energy compared, let's say, to St. Peter's in Rome, because that was built over several hundred years using special dimensions, using special materials, natural elements, materials like stone from the earth, and so on. So today we're not doing this anymore. Very few people today will even build a house according to what we call the invisible architecture.
Richard, nos has comentado anteriormente que en Chartres se encontraban dos elementos, uno que llamas doble línea oro y también otro que llamas doble línea plata. Y me gustaría que nos explicases qué es exactamente esto que llamas líneas oro y líneas plata.
There are some lines going around the planet. To be exact, for gold, there are 72 of them. For silver, also 72. Both going longitudinal and latitudinal. Latitude and longitude of the planet. Now, these lines are lines which resonate to the frequency of gold and to the frequency of silver. Some places you have double lines. Some places you have single lines. Chartres happens to be on a crossing of double lines, both for silver and gold. The lines for gold have exactly 72 centimeters, and I measured one of those. I was lucky to be in Strasbourg, in France, and right where the cathedral is, there is a line of gold which is going under the cathedral from a certain point to a certain point. And I measured this line, it was exactly 72 centimeters. The silver, it's 36 centimeters, which is half of 72. And these lines carry a lot of energy with them. And because they're going around the planet, they can accumulate energy from different places, and this energy can be sent to another place. So when you have a church or a cathedral located on the crossing of these lines, or even just on the line, you bring high energy to these places.
Con todo esto que nos has contado, finalmente, ¿qué objeto tiene la arquitectura invisible?
The invisible architecture in a church starts with the entrance at the front door, where the old or the ancient builders put there actually a number of Hartmann lines, one next to the other. The idea was to clean the negative energy of all those faithful, fidèles, coming into the church, to strip them of all this negative energy, to leave it behind. As the people progressed inside the church, they were under the influence of an ever-increasing energy. This ever-increasing energy was coming from, number one, the building, the actual building of the church. It's like a dolmen, okay? And the church had special dimensions based on the cubit. In Spanish, it's a codo. And in having this special dimension, it added energy to the entire building. Under the columns, you have underground water going from one column to the other, to the front of the church. Sometimes they didn't have actual water, so they used to use stones taken from the riverbeds. And they brought the stones and laid them down the same way as they were in the riverbed, simulating water flow. Because you know that water and stones in the water have memory. The columns were located on this water. The energy used to go up the columns, and they would come back down sometimes on the people praying. Especially if at the columns you had these little flower buds, like a little flower like this, the people under would then feel this energy as they were praying. Remember that in a church you can have several hundred or even thousands of people there. The total energy of the church, together with the energy of the people, is going to have a very high level of energy. This is going to make the prayers, the people praying, the faithful, it's going to increase their energy level to a point of euphoria. In addition to this, for the priest and for the purpose of the tabernacle, then you had a positive spiral of a vortex with a negative one outside of the church. This would give a very high level to the altar, where the priest was praying, and where you had the hostie, these are the small round that they used to give to the people. And so even for things like holy water, you will find under each receptacle of holy water, bénitier, en français it's bénitier, you have a small chimney. It's exactly the same dimension as the receptacle, as the vase that is there. Everything in a church, even the baptistère, where you have the baptism for the babies when they're born, that was usually on a water crossing, with the crossing of Hartman, crossing of Curry. Sometimes even there was a fault there. Everything to make this place high energy. So yes, in those days people took care of every little detail. You had time. When you take into consideration that a church was started maybe in 800 and they finished it in 1700, you had hundreds of years to build a church. It's not like today. Today, if you don't build a church in 2 years, it's terrible. So the invisible architecture was mostly used to the full extent to benefit the people going there, to pray, to concentrate. They had 3 levels. You had the underground, you had the level where we are, man is, and you had the level of the skies. This was applied vertically, and it was applied horizontally in the design of a church. Everything was taken care of, all aspects, philosophy, energetic, everything.